Right.
He's found it. Rhonda, welcome, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you tonight. I have given Zoom presentations before, but I do find that a little bit odd just sort of talking to my screen. So I hope everyone can hear me. If you can't at any point, Brian or Ian, wave arms or try and get my attention, send me a message, and we'll see how we go. So I originally developed this presentation for the Australian Plant Society back in March, based on concerns I had been developing for quite some time. So what I want to talk to you today about is saving our street trees. What is going on and what can we do about it? Now, I do have to warn you that the presentation is a bit of a roller coaster of emotion. We're going to start with why our street trees are important. That's the top of the roller coaster. That's the best it is. Then we have a bit of a depressing time talking about some challenges and threats to our street trees. Then hopefully it starts to get a bit more positive when I talk about government policy, and then finishing on a high, hopefully, talking about taking action and what we can all do about this problem to try and protect our street trees. So just prepare yourself for that roller coaster of emotion tonight.
Can we get Gay to turn the camera off and Brian, and then get you to maximise your screen, I guess? Yeah.
I think from my point of view, it's probably good just to see a few people down the side. Or did you want to not have people
I left mine on because Rhonda did want one or two faces.
Yeah.
And I'm leaving it over here so that I can actually see if anybody can't hear Rhonda.
Yeah, that's okay.
I can screen up and down.
Well, no worries.
Okay, I'm not sure how that affects the recording. So talking to this, I know that you know why street trees are important, but when you're talking to other people, it's just really good to have some different ways that you can mention the benefits of street trees. With different things are important to different people, and you just need to find something that resonates with other people. But I know that everyone here is probably well aware of these things. So first of all, from a very direct point of view, street trees are very important just for our physical health by providing shade. They can reduce the air and surface temperatures, and they encourage people to walk and cycle in a nicer environment. So that's good for our physical health as well. Trees and vegetation also improve our mental health, and there's much greater understanding of that now. And they do that by improving the amenity of our environment and the general aesthetics. And they also contribute to defining our local character and amenity. They also provide a lot of privacy and screening, both of residential properties and other less attractive developments. And I've got some photos of all these things. And then in terms of the broader environmental health, our street trees provide habitat for a range of fauna. They also clean the air, they store carbon, and then they reduce water runoff. So there's a whole package of benefits that our street trees provide. This is my local street in Sutherland, and I've got some lovely street trees across the road from me, and you can see how they're providing lovely shade over the street there. And that's in summer, very important in reducing the temperature, maybe not so much in winter. And in terms of providing our privacy and screening, in urban areas, there are a lot of unattractive developments. We've got roads, we've got railway lines, a lot of buildings, and just street trees can provide some lovely screening of some of those urban amenities. This one's screening the council depot in Kirrawee. And I will just say the photos that I'm using tonight are mostly taken by me just within a 30-minute walk of my home in Sutherland. I often walk over to Joseph Banks Native Plants Reserve at Karilla, and so a lot of the photos are just directly sort of on that path. But wherever you live in Sutherland Shire or the rest of Sydney, you'll be aware of very similar examples. So just think about things that are relevant in your local area. We have some lovely plantings screening the railway line at Janelli, but not necessarily screening the new station there. And also at Janelli, we've had some recent sort of 3 to 4 story residential developments, and the mature avenues of Lofosten and Confertus, the brush box there in Mitchell Avenue, have just provided a lovely screen of those new buildings, and it has really softened the impact there. And you can just see again in this lovely avenue at Janelli of the Lofosten, that's providing a lovely shady environment over a footpath to encourage people to walk to the station and walk to the nearby primary school and high school and community college. Sutherland Council does recognise the benefits of street trees. These are how it expresses the benefits on its website. And one benefit that I haven't mentioned is just the economic benefit of trees. There's certainly a lot of studies now that show that trees and vegetation do increase property values. So that's something to also just keep in mind. And so street trees have obviously always been important, but I think they're increasingly important now because we are seeing a loss of trees on private land due to development. And with the development that we're seeing now, there's a much higher density of development. So we're getting a lot more hard surfaces, a lot less green space, and often entire blocks are just cleared for development. So there's just nothing left on the block at all. Of course, we also have climate change and the high temperatures that will bring as well. So if we get to some of the challenges and threats, what I wanted to sort of divide this up into is talking about threats from sort of the private sector, which is basically us, and threats from the public sector. So really, the number one threat to our street trees is really us. That's just people. It's really as simple as that. And those threats come from a number of different sources. So if we talk about why trees are under threat from the private sector, particularly in Sutherland Shire, it is really development where single houses on blocks are being knocked down and replaced by duplexes, and often the associated parking and driveways also impacts trees. Trees are also removed by people to enhance their views from their property. And sometimes trees are removed because people simply don't like the aesthetics of the tree, whether it's the branches, they don't like the leaves, or they might like the fruit or the mess. So there's some reasons why people do not like street trees. I do have a lot of photos to illustrate some of these examples. So this is an example which I have walked past for many years. So I'm quite familiar with this site. This is in Kirrawee on the corner of Acacia Road and the Boulevard. There used to be a fibro scout hall here on the corner. And you can see just in the top left of the screen, this is an image from Google Street View from October 2021. Now, I would just ask you to count how many street trees you can see in this image. Now, I don't know whether I can hear anyone's responses or anyone wants to type something in chat, although I can't read that either. But there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 8 street trees visible in front of this block of land. Now, what happened was the scout hall, well, the block got sold, the scout hall got knocked down, and a pair of duplexes got built on this site. And over time, all those street trees, the little ones, gradually disappeared. There was one Melaleuca, probably the biggest tree that was left. And over time, that just got actually chopped off at ground level. You can see the trunk there on the right-hand side image. And the builders working on this site actually sprayed all the grass because it was easier than mowing it to kill it. The street trees suffered. And then the ones that did survive, they just chopped down sort of right at the end because they just really got in the way. So that was in March, that photo. Now in June, they were getting their properties ready for sale, laid down turf anywhere, and there was not a single street tree in sight. But just the other week, when I walked past, I noticed they've planted just two street trees in front of one of the properties. I'm not sure exactly what they are. They possibly could be magnolias, which they have planted a lot of in the site. I really, yeah, it's just just an example of what we're seeing around the Shire with changes in our street trees, but not an isolated example. This is another duplex development a little bit further away. This is actually on a corner, and you can see in front of these two duplexes, there are two street trees that are quite, well, the trunks are not that big in diameter, and they're quite thin, but they are, they've been there for a few years. They're, a couple of meters tall. And you can see they are actually directly in front of the driveways. So as I walked past, I was wondering what was going to happen to these trees here. And in June this year, it was clear what happened. They knocked down one of the trees to put the double driveway through, but they have left one of those street trees. So we'll just have to see whether that survives being so close to the driveway. This is another example at Como or Nally Skillcorn Avenue, a little fibro house. I have to admit those street trees there aren't that exciting at the front, but there's quite a lot of greenery on the block, and it's quite a nice contribution in terms of greenness there. Again, they knocked down the fibro house, built a pair of duplexes, cleared basically every bit of vegetation on the site. And when the for sale sign went up, there were no street trees or, in fact, any plantings at all on the front of this block, even though there's clearly quite a lot of space there. And that's just a slightly wider view where both properties are actually ready for sale. You can see one tiny tree there, but nothing actually on the street at all. The other threat to street trees from the private sector comes from parking and driveways. A good example here in Warrenora Crescent at Como, where people are parking on the nature strip, inverted commas there, which would make it very difficult for a tree to survive. And then even where the tree, Sutherland Council has given it a huge area, a protected area with, a wooden frame and some wooden supports, a car has parked right up against the tree. So you can see that tree is really under threat. And if that vehicle keeps doing that all the time, that tree is going to have a hard time staying alive there. And those trees were actually replacements for mature trees, which council had recently cut down. Just another example of parking. You can see there's a little street tree frame there with some supports, but the street tree itself has died. The vehicle driving past a lot there has probably compacted the soil a lot, and you can see it does that fairly regularly just by the bare soil underneath. Now, the other threat to street trees, which we definitely, I'm using the word street trees to refer to trees on public space, but in particular sort of trees in front of properties. And here we have an example from Castle Cove, where trees on public land were killed to enhance someone's view. So about 250 trees were killed on a public reserve. And the Sydney Morning Herald did quite a detailed article on that in November 2023. Now you might think, well, that's on the other side of Sydney. We're not like that over here in southern Sydney. But sure enough, we are. So in March this year, the leader, actually not the leader, the ABC had an article about trees being vandalised on Botany Bay, and council responded by putting up signs, indicating that the trees had actually been poisoned illegally. So you might think, well, yes, individual people are, killing street trees for their own personal benefit, but the public sector is also a threat to our street trees. And the public sector does tend to remove a lot of street trees for transport reasons. And I've got some pictures of that. If the trees are in the way under electricity lines, and also when they conduct risk and safety audits of trees. And I've just got the photo there at the bottom of the screen just shows where council took out a tree on a corner so they could put in a footpath, ironically, even though the tree would have been a nice shade for the footpath, for people using the footpath. So just some examples of where the public sector has cleared street trees for transport projects. Just in our local area, the New South Wales government cleared trees in Leonay Street to widen the road. They cleared street trees to provide an active transport link for walkers and cyclists. And they've also cleared street trees under utility lines in Kirrawee. Further afield, when the light rail was put through on Anzac Parade, a lot of very mature Moreton Bay figs were cleared. And as part of the Western Harbour Tunnel at Camaray, also a lot of clearing of street trees and trees on public land. Sutherland Council, it expanded the car park at Sutherland Leisure Centre, which required clearing a lot of mature trees. They have replanted some, but certainly a huge impact there. And one of the reasons for clearing street trees that has really upset me recently has been clearing trees because they pose a risk to people's safety. And what happened here is in April 21, a Port Jackson fig tree fell down in the centre of Sutherland near the IGA supermarket. And after that, it seems that Sutherland Council conducted an audit of all the street trees in the Shire and decided that they posed such a risk that they needed to be removed. But what happened was, that was bad enough, but they then did not replace the trees in a timely manner at all. They basically just cleared a huge number of mature street trees. And it's one sort of related example. In July 21, Council removed those 2 very mature fig trees at Sutherland Station, which they had previously fought, the rail authority to actually keep, but they now decided they needed to go. But it took about 2 years before Council replaced those trees with a row of lily pillies against the fence line. And if you want to know what's happened to street trees in your area, Google Maps Street View is fantastic to find before and after photos. So if you need evidence of something, Google Maps Street View, and I've got some examples here as well. Oh, that photo there is the fig trees at Sutherland that are no longer there. So this is an example of how you can use Google Street View, and it just shows, when you look at the dates, the impact of Sutherland Council's risk and safety audit. So in August 2020, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a lovely mature street tree. And then in October 21, you can see that tree has just been disappeared with a bit of mulch left at the at ground level there. Another example, which I think shows that you need to take a broader view of safety trade-offs, is this example of a playground at Leonay Street in Sutherland. It's a kids' playground. On the western boundary, there were some lovely mature trees that provided shade for kids playing in the playground. This is in April 21. But you know what happened? Yes, Council cleared the trees there that were providing shade over the playground. So now the kids are all fully exposed to the western sun. So the tree won't fall on them, but they'll probably get skin cancer instead. When I gave this talk to Sutherland Group back in March, one of our members, Peter Shelton, came up with some photos from his own area in Grays Point. So you can see in August 2015, there's a lovely mature street tree there just near the bins. In November 2016, Google Street View shows it has had a bit of heavy pruning, possibly for safety reasons. And then in October 21, the tree's still there, but have a look at the house that's in front of. And in April 24, the house has been replaced by a duplex and the tree's no longer there. And that is just very typical of what's happening throughout Sutherland Shire. Some of the other challenges and threats to our street trees, of course, trees do naturally age and die. They can also suffer a slow death from soil compaction and changed water flows from development in the vicinity. And of course, with climate change, although after our wet months, it seems hard to say, but generally our weather will be getting hotter and dry into the future. And some of our street trees just will not be able to cope with that. Banksia serrata in particular seems to have suffered over the last couple of years, which is a pity because it's a local species indigenous to this area. Just an example of natural aging here, we have this street tree that was so significant near Como School that when they actually built the road gutter around the street tree. But when that street tree died, that was November 27, when the tree was gone by 2013, it was replaced with a little callistemon, but that callistemon has struggled ever since. And 10 years later, it's still not, it's nowhere near providing the replacement shade that the previous tree provided. And that's right near a school, public school. So you might be saying, well, there must be some laws about trees on private land, trees on government land. What is going on? So the problem, as the Sydney Morning Herald pointed out in a great article in January 24, was that on private land, the laws are very rarely enforced. The fines for cutting down trees are very low, and people are very rarely charged with any offences at all. Now, of course, you need evidence that someone has done something wrong or done something. But even with evidence, that article showed that it is extremely difficult to get people convicted of an offence. And that's because there are so many different agencies involved. There's the council, there's the police, there's the EPA, there's Department of Planning, there's National Parks. And so everyone has different laws, and then a lot of behaviour just sort of falls through the cracks. And then when it comes to government land, the government does consult with the community, particularly over projects that will require trees to be removed, but the trees still get removed. And there's often very poor monitoring of approval conditions for public projects, and poor monitoring of the trees that are supposed to replace the ones that have been removed. So if we just have a look at the state government policy on trees, the Premier Gladys Berejiklian, remember her, back in 2018, had a 5 million tree initiative for Sydney, where she wanted to plant 5 million trees over the next 12 years to boost the canopy from 16% to 40% by 2030. Now, I mean, that sounds great, but the trouble with this initiative is it's more about the talk than the action. And planting trees is not enough if they don't survive. So we seem to have KPIs for planting trees, but not KPIs to actually sort of keep trees alive and grow to maturity. And in January this year, the Sydney Morning Herald reported on a study that was actually commissioned by the New South Wales government on tree canopy in different council areas. Now, there was a bit of dispute about the figures, and Sutherland Council did not agree with the state government figures. But in 2019, we had about 30% tree cover, and that's not counting the national park at all. In 2022, that had decreased by about a quarter. Now, anyone who's lived in Sutherland Shire would know, particularly with that council safety audit in 2021, that a lot of mature trees did disappear. So even if you dispute some of the figures, there's clearly been a big drop in our tree canopy, and that's measuring trees as over 3 metres in height. And the report and the methodology are available on the Department of Planning website. I have got a copy of the methodology report there. Now, people were concerned And I wrote a letter to the leader about that. And a member of the public did contact me who was also concerned. We've been supporting each other, but it's hard to know what to do sometimes. And in terms of the local Sutherland Council policy on trees, the council does have an urban tree and bushland policy, which was written in November 21. And surprisingly, one of its objectives is no net loss in canopy cover. But clearly we have had a huge loss in canopy cover in the time that this policy covers. Sutherland Council does have a number of street tree planting programs, and it has a verge garden policy. But the trouble with the planting programs is, it's all very well to plant the trees, but who actually looks after them and keeps them alive and replaces the trees that die? And then when it comes to development applications, again, there might well be a policy that you're supposed to have, replacement trees, but who actually monitors and follows up on those conditions? I mean, I've shown you some examples where you sort of wonder who's doing the follow-up. I will say the good news about the urban tree policy is that it is due for a review in 3 years' time, which is actually about now. So it'll be interesting to see with the local government elections whether we hear anything about the review of this policy or not. An issue with street trees is what to plant, and certainly with climate change, there are some research programs investigating what are the best trees for our hotter and drier future, recognising that we need a diversity of species and also, of course, some genetic diversity. And I really hope that we can plant more naturally and move away from single trees planted in an ocean of acres of grass, and move more towards planting in groups and not just a single tree, and also planting shrubs and grasses at the bases of trees just to give them a bit more protection and create a bit more of a natural environment. So this is where we get to hopefully the more uplifting part of the presentation after all that depressing news. And what I want you to do is just think about taking action and what you can do to try and overcome some of these challenges and threats to our street trees. So the good news is that people do care about our street trees, and there are similar threats in many council areas across Sydney, well, probably most council areas, let's face it. Oatley Flora and Fauna in the Georges River area is very concerned about working with council on street trees in this area. The Total Environment Centre has a Green Spaces program, and the Nature Conservation Council also is interested in urban green spaces. And there's a range of actions possible, ranging from the local to the global, and depending on what your preference is, you can sort of think of it as, the pen or the spade. You can, write letters, or you can get out there and get your hands dirty. And you can also think about taking actions through the life cycle of street trees. So you can think about what you can do to protect existing street trees, new street trees, protecting seedlings through to maturity, and then thinking about replacing trees when they reach the end of their natural life. So just to give you some ideas about what you can do to take action. For our existing street trees, we really need to protect the ones we have. And I've got some photos of this as well. We need to protect them from damage. We need, possibly with stakes, we need to weed around them. We need to water them if it's really dry. And also what's really important is where you do see a threat or a damage to a street tree, is report that damage to Sutherland Council. Our council area is huge. There's a lot going on. There aren't necessarily that many staff. So if you see a problem, email council or use the Snap Send Solve app, where you take a photo of something, send it through the app, the Snap Send Solve app, it goes to council, they know exactly the location of it, and then hopefully they solve the problem. And that might be going out and replacing a tree that's dead or died. So we need to ensure that where our existing street trees might be damaged or threatened, that they are replaced. The other thing you can do is comment on local DAs. You can sign up for something called planning alerts, which will send you an email about all the local DAs in your area, and you can see which ones might be threatening our local vegetation. The other thing we need to do is improve Sutherland Council's tree policy. So I encourage everyone to read the existing policy and just look for the opportunities to improve that. And of course, with our local government elections coming up, lobbying our local councillors, telling them how important our street trees are is important. There are so many competing pressures for council's budget and resources, but we need to let our councillors know that our street trees are important for those range of benefits they provide for us and the general environment. And if you want to go public in your actions, you can write letters, or if you're into social media, you can post on social media. It might be photos, something as simple as a photo, it might be a message. So keep that in mind as well. Now, in terms of some photos, when I gave my presentation in March, I was thrilled when one of our members, Diane from Bundina, mentioned that in Bundina, they've started a group called Bundina Tree Keepers. Now, they've only been going for a couple of months, but what they do is they get out there in the local environment and they just weed and look after their local street trees. And while they're doing that, they can talk to the community about what's going on and why it's important to look after them. So that is a fantastic program, fantastic idea, fantastic name, Bundina Tree Keepers. Here I've just got some examples of photos showing how street trees can be physically protected when they're quite young. Well, that of course is no guarantee. The photo on the left there, that's actually a replacement row of trees to replace trees that had previously been taken out, unfortunately. And on the right side, some of those street trees, even with those huge posts, have just suffered from either not enough water or too much water. They're outside a new development. This is an example where Sutherland Council has done some planting under electricity wires to replace trees that have previously been removed. But you can see in that group of trees, there are a couple of dead trees. We just need to let council know about that so they can come out and hopefully replace those. And where you might see a building site like this, where they're not taking very good care of the street trees out the front, again, that might be something that you could let council know about. You can see, yes, there's just a huge amount of, long grass around these trees. They're not properly protected. You can see they've been damaged by vehicles accessing the building site, unfortunately. And if we actually want more street trees in our local area, we need to strengthen our street tree policy. We need stronger KPIs over trees surviving and not just planting them. And when I gave this talk in March, one of the council staff mentioned that we can actually encourage people to ask for street trees. Sutherland Council does allow people to ask for a street tree if they want one, and then it can be planted outside their property. We need to think about planting trees more naturally in groups and with shrubs. I've mentioned that sort of adopted tree type program that Bundina is using, lobbying our councillors and going public. Yes, I've mentioned those. Here we just have an example from Kirrawee where some replacements under electricity wires were actually planted in some more naturalistic groupings. And they're doing okay. And I also just wanted to finish by saying, yes, street trees, it's not just about planting in front of people's houses. There's certainly lots of public space like cul-de-sacs or the edge of public facilities like playing fields and parks. There's plenty of scope to provide street trees, to provide all those other benefits I've mentioned earlier. So this is my final slide now, and I just wanted to remind people that, yes, it can be a bit depressing, but if you want to change anything, it is up to us. We need to be alert to the threats to our street trees and take the action that you feel comfortable with. It might be taking action as an individual, You might be taking action as a group if you're part of a group, and take the action that suits you, whether you're a pen type person where you can dash off a letter to the editor or a social media post, or you might be out there with your spade sort of doing a bit of weeding or whatever. And we need to treat our street trees as assets that need to be properly managed. On a broader scale across Sydney, we certainly need to strengthen and enforce laws that protect our trees, monitor our trees, replace trees that die promptly, and focus on survival and not just planting. So everyone gets excited about planting, but we need our trees to actually survive, particularly our mature trees. So thanks very much, everyone, and I will exit my screen share and hopefully we can have some questions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. And we can have everybody putting their screens on now, can't we? So that Rhonda knows that there are real people here.
It is so very odd talking just to your own screen.
We're getting used to it now, Rhonda.
We've got people joining now. Well, I must say that tonight Sutherland Council had the topic of that very topic, draft tree and bushland strategy, and a representative from Shire Can and also a representative from Sutherland Shire Environment Centre were there presenting for 3 minutes about why council should do more rather than and actually have some monetary figures behind it rather than just suggesting they do things. So that's something that can be followed up by everyone in the Shire.
So was that on the council meeting, Ian, as an agenda item?
Yeah, apparently it was, yeah.
Well, I haven't seen that policy advertised for public consultation yet, but if it does get advertised, certainly encourage people to make a submission on the policy.
Yeah. One of the problems is, at least in my street now, we don't even get the leaders, so I don't ever get to see what's advertised. The collapse of local newspapers is really affecting communities, I think, local communities.
I definitely agree with that. I haven't had the leader myself for the last few weeks, but if you sign up to the council e-newsletter, they usually list the public consultations in that, and you can also sign up on the council website for something called Join the Conversation, which I absolutely hate, but they like you to sort of put your feedback in through this particular website. I think it's so they know who you are and you don't sort of put in double submit. If you're signed up for that, they'll send you emails about what's out for consultation at the moment. So even though there are a lot of things you mightn't be interested in, it's just a good way of keeping track of just being alert to things. I mean, there are things about like dog parks in Cronulla, which like I'm personally not that interested in, so I just ignore those.
Rhonda, I have a question that might kick off debate and or discussion, and that's the suitability of trees in certain locations. I'm sure that causes grief for a lot of people. When you put in a tree under a power line that's going to go through the power line and then they get hair cutted every year, it becomes quite frustrating. I was curious about you showing your Lophostomans, considering they're being removed from Royal National Park as a weed at the moment. But so examples like that would be examples that we could probably put all over the Shire in different forms.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, when I was doing the presentation, I took lots of photos just around my local area. And what I realised is that, particularly around Sutherland, the Lophostomans, I know people don't like them, they're not native to this area, but my God, they are tough, hardy, robust trees. And you can tell that because you look at the size of the trees, like they have survived. They have survived everything. They've survived being pruned, they've survived footpaths, they've survived guttering, they've survived everything. And they're actually still there because you can walk around and see how big they are. So I agree.
And for those of you who don't know all these Latin-y stuff, their common name is brush box.
Although you don't want, a monoculture of brush box, the fact that we actually have them and they've survived, it's made me realize how hardy they are. And of course, what we need to do is try and find, and there is a lot of research going on in this. Macquarie, I think Macquarie Uni and Western Sydney Uni both have programs looking at more suitable street trees for our changing climate. And part of that, of course, is choosing, as with all plants and gardening, the right tree for the right place and the right purpose. So you don't want to be planting, 50-meter high eucalypts under power lines. But I do think we can do better than planting a 3-meter high shrubby bottle brush. So, so there's plenty of spots in the Shire where we can plant trees that aren't under power lines. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just throw in that and I feel compelled to do this. If you go down near Cronulla Pool, down near Woolooware, on the western side of the boulevard, the Kingsway rather, the southern side of the Kingsway, there's these beautiful eucalyptus racemosa, the stringy barks. They're really tall and they've been there for ages. It's a wonderful area to go and visit. Rhonda, I'll just throw in, what do you think of blueberry ash as a street tree?
Yeah, to be honest, they're a pretty slow growing tree.
Mm.
When I used to work in a nursery and people always had to come in for a tree replacement tree and they didn't really want one, you'd recommend a blueberry ash because they're not really that big, they're not really that dense, and they're growing on the spectrum of fast to slow. I mean, they are pretty, the flowers are lovely, but I wouldn't just want to plant one blueberry ash and say, okay, that's a tree, because it's not really providing a tree function. It would be fine in a group with other things.
Yeah.
It might be suitable for under, Brian's electricity wise, where you really don't want it to get too big too fast.
Yeah.
They're not big or dense trees.
Yeah. And what do you think of the canopy that they provide?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They don't really provide much canopy.
Yeah, I've always thought of them as a very pretty shrub.
Yeah, me too. But it has been suggested down the Wollongong area as a tree for cityscapes,
Rainforest margin / edge type plants. So in the Wollongong area where they're getting more moisture and they might be more protected, they might be faster and they might be more suitable. So that, again, it's about the right tree for the right place. And I thought you made a really interesting comment about that example of the Eucalyptus racemosa. It just shows you how important trees are in providing local character and identity. So we don't necessarily need or want or have to have the same street trees everywhere. But, when you go to an area and you see a tree or a group of trees that have been there for a long time, that really reinforces that local character.
It does, yeah.
Character and amenity.
I think Gay's got a question now.
Yes.
It's more of a comment than a question. I'm from Willoughby Environmental Protection Association, and we've been very involved with that Castle Cove destruction that you showed earlier. And the council were pretty slow to react, but they have reacted and they're still pursuing it. They hope they're going to find somebody, but I don't know. The real problem is catching somebody in the act.
Yeah.
You've got to actually see them with a poison in their hand or a chainsaw, Otherwise it won't stand up in a prosecution. We're losing more trees on private land, particularly since the 1050 legislation came in.
Yeah.
And that has been a disaster here because we've got quite a lot of bushland properties backing onto bushland, and that's been absolute open slather for people. And our council is not bad in planting street trees. They're planting different trees in different places. local eucalypts in some places, cheese trees in other places that are very concretey and built up, and they're growing very quickly, and I think they'll be a good shady street tree. And in my street, which does back onto the bush, they're planting back housias, which I actually think is quite a good choice.
Yeah, I think you've made a really good point there. And those, the newspaper articles I mentioned, particularly the one from January this year, which a lot of people might have missed because it was right after New Year's Day. It went into a lot of detail about how difficult it is to actually convict and charge or fine people for doing something even really obvious. And there was one example of a man on private property who actually, you know, got a tree clearing company to come in and clear trees that shouldn't have been cleared. And like, it was on his land, you know, they knew the tree clearing company, and it all hinged on exactly what he had or hadn't said to the tree clearing company.
Yeah, yeah.
It all fined. He then managed to get off it on appeal. And even if that original sort of conviction had stayed, the fine was so low, given a property value in Sydney,
Exactly.
they do it anyway, because in terms of that risk-benefit trade-off, what developers do, it's a cost of business. So you're like, very disappointing. And that's where we as members of the sort of public just need to do what we can to draw council's attention to issues when we notice them. And the other point about the sort of fire protection, yes, in Sutherland Shire as well, there was that time after that law first came in where people were just clearing trees like left, right and centre. And then I think it was after a couple of years they then sort of modified the policy a little bit. But because all the trees...
Not enough.
It didn't really matter after that, because all the people who wanted to clear the trees had already cleared them in that first sort of period that the policy came in. I always wonder why some people choose to live in some on the edge of bush when they don't like the bush and they're worried about fire.
They should go and live in Bondi.
Yeah, there's plenty of concrete, you know, units instead.
Before I take you to Lydia's question, which is in the chat line, Rhonda, I'll ask Chris, where are you where your blueberry ashes are not very robust? And at the moment, you're still on mute. Okay.
I'm in Dulwich Hill, and there's just a few I've seen around the streets near me have died after, 3 or 4 or more years.
Right.
Some disease, I presume. I don't know what the cause is.
Dulwich Hill is a bit of clay there.
Clay, yeah.
Yeah.
Ashfield Charles.
Yeah.
Leanna Matter Group.
We have been through some very tough climatic conditions where we had, I'm not so excited of the exact combination, but we sort of had a year of dry. That was actually the middle of last year, the middle of 23. And then this year it's been like 3 months of complete ridiculously heavy rainfall in winter. So a lot of plants can cope with one or the other, but they can't cope with the combination in a relatively short time. And so, even a tree that you might think is relatively hardy can cope with a dry. That's followed by a lot of rain. That's going to be too much. Whereas a tree that you cope with a lot of moisture, it's not going to be able to cope with that if it's followed immediately by like a really tough dry period. So, it is. Some trees just generally seem to be hardier than others in coping with a greater variation, and other things are quite sensitive. But I would say Dulwich Hill is a pretty tough environment for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Except for humans.
Plenty of other.
Actually, you've got quite a good corridor there.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
And Lydia, I see that Nigel has given you a whole pile of hints in Chatter's line as well. Do you, shall Rhonda, I flick it to Nigel so he can tell Lydia all about what trees and bushes are required for her birds?
Yeah. I will just say that fleshy fruits and street trees can be a tricky combination.
Mm.
Fruit is falling on a footpath, and a lot of people are using that footpath like near train stations, bus stops, things like that. It's get a bit tricky, but I know birds eat fleshy fruits and it's all part of the ecosystem. But yeah, there's definitely some things that are better placed, than others.
We've got some fleshy fruits between the various units blocks that I've got here, and it
I
does bring
think
in.
that's a very valid.
Yeah, it does bring in the flying foxes, and I love them, hearing them at night. Sorry, Lydia, go ahead. Your turn, Lydia.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. Yes, I think what Rhonda said is a valid point. That was sort of one of the feedbacks from our residents about some of the trees to be planted in our street, because our street is on the corridor, a conservation corridor. We have these, strong incentive and also motivation to plant for the small bush birds, because we got a lot of them. And one of the trees recommended is blueberry ash. And that's one of the concerns that the residents have, is that if it is on the nature path, and because some of our elderly residents are living over there, and if the if the birds eat the fruit and then drop the seeds on the road, it could cause some of the trip hazards and issues like that. So I just trying to find a way to convince them what are the the good trees that is can overcome that aspects of the disadvantage, but also will be equally beneficial for the birds.
Yeah, Rhonda, just to place Lydia.
So that's why
she's at the in a cul-de-sac at the end of the Walleye Creek Regional Park, the eastern end, and behind the houses is Walleye Creek Regional Park in almost pure weed form. And there are a couple of bush blocks that Lydia is fighting like crazy to protect, that she hopes also can be converted into native bushland.
Yeah, I mean, the blueberry ash is an interesting tree because, I mean, yes, it has the berry, but it's actually quite a small berry, and it doesn't sort of flat all over the ground and provide trip hazards. So I would say, like, I'm all the fruits that I wouldn't want to have to like walk under or over. And I've never really thought a blueberry ash has causing lots of problems from that point of view.
Okay.
And it's fleshy. It's not like a fig that like flat and everywhere. And the other
Sorry, I missed what's the species that you recommended, because it's sort of breaking up a little bit.
What I would say is you can still plant blueberry ash, but just think about where you plant it. And I think blueberry ash is good planted with other things, but you might put that further away from the footpath. You wouldn't plant it so it grows like overhanging. Fleshy fruits that I definitely would not want to plant near a footpath. So I don't think blueberry ash is going to cause that.
Yeah.
I think people just do not know a lot about plants, and they might be confusing a lily pilly with a blueberry ash, thinking of a tree as the same as the blueberry ash. So yeah, you just need to make sure everyone's actually talking about the same thing and not making assumptions about how big the fruit is or how squashy it is.
So this lily pilly argument and discussion versus blueberry ash that Chris has added to here, what do we mean by lily pilly? Are we talking about Ackmeni smithii, or are we or the other variations that are called blueberry?
Smithii with
lily pilly.
Rhonda.
Ian reckons it's mostly it's smithii.
Well, there's so
Is
many.
that what you mean, Rhonda, or there's because there's a whole pile of different blueberry lily pillies, isn't there?
There are so many different lily pillies that one person might be talking about saying the word lily pilly. I don't want a lily pilly because they're thinking of one that has much bigger fruit.
Yeah.
squashier, and someone else might be saying, oh no, lily pilly's okay. I mean, you can even get lily pillies that don't necessarily produce fruit. So there's just so many cultivars now, and you can get compact ones, you can get tall ones. It's just, you need to know what people are actually talking about. So yeah, I wouldn't, but I do agree that, yeah, blueberry ash is not as bad as lily pilly in terms of the hazard from the fruit.
The other question, Rhonda, is that we've got a lot of privets at the back of the block, which we wanted to eventually replace. But right now, the small bush birds are heavily relying on those berries at the moment. And what would be a good strategy to slowly replace those, or is it actually a strategy to replace them? Because I know that in Marrickville, they are not replacing a lot of the privets now because they said it's not legislated by I think it's called Biodiversity Act, or they said it's no longer enacted, so they are not replacing them because they said their lack of mid-story plants in their area. So so I was just thinking, you know, ideally we wanted to replace them, but how do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult issue. I personally do not support the argument of keep the weeds to feed the animals. I think you're better off getting rid of the weeds and putting in some natural native species that the native animals are used to eating and like to eat, and do that as soon as possible. And not, I just don't like this argument of keep the weeds, because if it's producing berries and the animals are eating them, it's just spreading more and more weeds. It's just creating a bigger problem. So you do just have to at one point say, yes, we are going to have to clear this. But animals, if you're just clearing a relatively small patch and replanting that, animals are quite good at finding other places to go to, particularly if you're near the Walleye Creek corridor. So it's about, if you do clear, you've got to replant really quickly, and you'd want to be replanting a mix of things, so fast growing things that can provide food and protection for animals while slower growing plants are growing. And you also need to plant a diversity of, you know, complete heights, from ground covers to shrubs to trees. What often happens in regen projects is a very limited range of species are used. Often
Yes.
that's just what's easily available. And so have to put a bit more effort into planning and getting a wider range of species. We want to have your tray of plants to plant here, and you cut down your privet here, you cut down here, and you take your plant from here and you put it there. Like you don't like wait a year in between or wait for perfect conditions.
But
that's
Rhonda, we're going on and about this habitat stuff, and both for animals and for cost, in this case, economic cost. I'm looking at Nigel's comment for Lydia about poas, themata, and microlena. Not sure why I didn't think of barbed wire grass, but never mind. To what extent are councils resistant to putting in native grasses instead of in other foreign grasses that have to be mowed constantly? Wouldn't native grasses on the verges actually protect the whatever trees that we put in and cost a hell of a lot less to maintain?
Well, I think it's all about public education. So you might remember there's a patch of bushland just near Kirrawee Station in Sutherland, and it's actually an endangered ecological community. But the trouble is,
with a walkway right through the centre of it,
that looks really messy because trees with an understory of grasses. And so people keep contacting council, when are you going to, you know, maintain that awful, you know, patch of, you know.
Dear, yeah.
So what they did was they put a sign up in that park saying this is an endangered ecological community, you know, whether I think it was ironbark, turpentine, or whatever it was that had the grassy understory.
Yeah.
So part of it part of getting public acceptance is public education
Yeah.
about what is natural and what the benefits of that are. But I mean, again, in some parts of Sydney, like perhaps the inner west, if the footpaths are really narrow, you're not going to plant floppy grasses where they block the footpath. But those sort of grasses might be more appropriate around the bases of trees in local parks.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's why you just have to be very aware of how spaces are being used. And in some parts of Sydney, like the inner west, there's a lot of, I mean, I used to be a transport planner. I know there's a lot of competition for scarce space, public space. And if you want people to walk and cycle, you've got to have clear footpaths. But we need to take that space away from cars, not away from our trees.
Yeah. I've been dominating, or several of us. Are there any other comments around?
Well,
Now, come on, Chuan, you can tell us that yourself, sir.
yeah, I just like to throw in that on my comment that I put up there, SSEC, particularly for Sutherland Council at the moment, but this would apply to all councils, that they apply appropriate performance measures, that they actually fund the outcomes that they wish rather than talk about them, and that they also have update their or if they haven't got an old one, actually conduct a biodiversity study to get things underway. So you can read that in the chat. But
Yeah.
the
And speaking of chat, Ian, when you close, can
Yep.
you capture all the chat points? There's some good.
Oh, it is closed. It is captured, but usually NPA Samantha just wants the picture usually. But
Yeah, but we could use, but the branch could use this for our own submissions. to
I've
cap-
always got the chat, so
Yeah.
it's all recorded.
Good,
Yeah,
thanks.
so that'll be fine.
Because I like that suggestion about seeing if we can get incentives from council for doing these things.
Mm.
I think what's about the incentives is, yes, you want people to look after the street trees in front of their property, but other people can come and affect the health of that tree. So you don't sort of want to create incentives for people to do something to sort of annoy their neighbours. But
That Chris has got that problem in Dulwich Hill by the sound of it. Maybe she needs softer power.
Yeah. Have
No? Okay.
put a G bung in, a few G bungs.
Oh, bugger it. Put in some prickly hakea bushes instead.
Oh,
Love to.
Council gives away free plants. That's a kind of incentive.
Yeah, 2 a year with your rate notice.
You can save them up.
Yeah.
first started that, they used to only hand out trees.
Yeah.
The problem was people were planting inappropriate trees in inappropriate places. And
On, yeah, on
Sutherland,
top of their sewer lines or something.
Sutherland Council gives out, you can get 2 seedlings from the nursery. And of course, the nursery has little ground covers. And if you've only got a unit, you can get a couple of little brachycomb daisies to put in pots. So it's good that you can now use that voucher for a range of different sized plants. And the idea is it just gets people to the nursery. And once they've seen the council nursery and know where it is, they can then go back and, hopefully buy a lot of other things.
Rhonda, and this probably applies to an awful lot of people around here. We've got the weirdest council reserve here in Engadine. You probably won't even notice it. It follows footpaths between the units, widens out in some places, narrows down again. It actually has an official name. It's hard to know where one unit ends or unit property ends and council land ends. My wife, who was here next to me listening to you and who has, I think, gone to watch Trump on television now, finally got a map from council to this area, has got council coming out, killing off whatever blackberries are appearing, etc. And she's now collecting, she hopes, from all the units around, their vouchers for their free plants so that we can do the planting in the council reserve when we can't plant them in our own gardens now that we're shrunk in a unit. A
Well,
thought.
It's an absolutely perfect example of taking action at the individual level that suits you. That's a great idea. Like you're doing something, in your block, collecting vouchers from people. You're prepared to do the spade work of digging the hole, and your fellow residents are prepared to sort of hand over their vouchers. I think that sounds like a win-win. I think
We hope.
sometimes it's interesting. You can sort of pretend you don't know who really owns the land. Sometimes it can sometimes be easier just to do something. Like if you want to weed somewhere, like just go and weed somewhere. Like don't agonize over, whether council owns the land or not. Just pull out the weed. But yes, if you want to get plants, council will often, just give you plants if you can, mount a, halfway convincing argument and say you're prepared to plant them.
It takes a lot of phone calls, but my wife is now on first name based terms with pretty well everybody in council that she needs to talk to.
Different ways to get out of them.
All right. Ian, it's 8:22. You've already missed part thereof of that. I think we'll just have a look around. Is there anybody with a final question? John looks like he would like to speak. No. Okay.
Actually, I have one question, if you don't mind.
I was hoping you would butt in with your own comment earlier on.
I was
away.
actually typing my questions in the chat, but since no one's asking questions, I'll have a go. So, in one of your slides, you mentioned about the difficulty in monitoring. I seriously don't understand that in this age of technology, monitoring is an issue for trees. Like council can easily deploy drones, even along the street, for example, so it doesn't violate the privacy. Because I know drones, you cannot go into like property, private properties, but along the street, drones at 100 meters, for example, can easily monitor or take photos of trees, right?
Yeah,
Is there something behind the reason why they don't do it?
Well, webcams would be are pretty cheap now too.
They've also got Nearmap. They can use Nearmap as well.
Yeah.
There was
It's a matter of the council actually getting people to do it, I guess. Sorry, Rhonda, but I'm just suggesting that's an answer.
Right.
Sorry, I just missed the very beginning. What slide were you referring to? I was saying that trees, one of the benefits of trees is they provide privacy to people.
No, I think in one of your slides you mentioned that monitoring as a part of KPI in terms of planting trees and number of them that's died and all that. And one of my ideas about using drone is can be applied for this incentive business in the future if council do like to adopt it, right? If you have one tree, you get $50 discount in the rate, and then they can easily just monitor if the tree is still there or not.
I thought you were monitoring people poisoning their trees originally.
No,
gotcha.
No. That is too difficult.
Yeah.
That is too difficult. I'm thinking of the trees that being planted, how many survive and all that, whether they can be replaced. So
a survey technique. Yeah.
I mean, the trouble is the trees are on public land, and so it's sort of that really tricky thing. Well, like, yes, they're on public land, but we also want the people that are closest to them to look after them because they're the ones that are in the best position to know what's going on and sort of look after them. But some people will just say, well, I'm not having anything to do with that. That's not on my land. So I suppose the people that already like trees, they're already going to look after them. And the people that don't like them are not going to look after a tree for $50 because they prefer to park their car there. So that's why part of it's about education, whether you can try and convince people of the broader benefits. Maybe some people will always want to park their car rather than have a tree in front of their house.
Yeah. Gay.
There's a group in Ku-ring-gai that that have set up a tree watch,
Mm.
which is a WhatsApp group. And we're thinking of doing that in Willoughby too.
Yeah,
Okay.
good stuff.
It smacks to me here, Chris's comment about grasses in her neighbourhood and the people who don't like them, etc.
Mm.
That it's not just a matter of doing it, it's a matter of engaging people as to why you're doing it and bringing them in at the beginning, isn't it?
I think that's why the Bundina Tree Keeper group is such a great example. I mean,
Yeah.
Bundina is renowned for its, sort of community vibe. And so, having a group of residents, if they're out there weeding around a tree, they can casually just, chat to someone walking past with their dog, and the person will say, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" And then they can have a conversation, and then that sort of flows through. So Bundina does sound like an ideal place to do that. Trying to do that on the middle of a busy road, you don't want to get run over yourself, trying to do something like, yeah. But yeah, I love the idea of the tree watch and a WhatsApp group. Because often the more people know about something sooner, the more likely it is that something can be done.
Mm.
There's a street in Miranda that school kids they've planted maybe 12 to 20 trees, and against each one they've put a school kid's drawing of why trees are important. I haven't seen that anywhere else, but thought it was quite sweet.
Yeah, well, maybe several years ago, when council started its street tree planting program, they planted trees along the ridge from Denali to Como, and the trees were sort of adopted by the school kids, and they had little like handmade signs and whatever. But yeah, I don't know how that actually lasted, because certainly when you walk along the street now, you can see lots of examples of where there used to be a tree and there's no longer a tree. You need to get.
And John, I think, wants to speak.
Sorry.
You're breaking up badly,
Breaking up
John.
badly,
Yeah,
John.
Put it in the chat, John. It's the voice is changing. Yeah.
I wonder whether the council people with the all right to put at their homes.
Yeah, it's still breaking up.
Put in the chat. All right.
Yeah, thanks. So we'll wait for John to get his message up on chat. John's on a mobile phone, in case you couldn't work it out.
I'm traveling at the moment.
And traveling.
With your dressing gown on.
No, I think last time I saw any evidence of John, he was up photographing Brahminy kites in Harvey Bay.
Yeah, that's when the last time you saw him. He's coming in on it.
Who knows where he is now? And we've had several people have to go now, so
I'll leave it on for a while.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabe. Thanks for calling in. And I think John's probably having fun trying to chat on his phone as well. I think what we'll do, John, is say thanks to you, Rhonda, and John can get the message. Here he's got it. Does council ask residents if it's okay to plant one in front? I presume in front of a house.
On the verge.
I think it varies, because when they cut down the trees and the electricity wires in Kirrawee, it was such a wide corridor, and the council had said, well, we're cutting them down, but we're going to replace. So I don't think they would have asked the residents, because they were going to do it anyway, and it was quite a wide corridor. And council does actually have a program where it allows residents to request a tree. So
yeah. So if I look at that tree out the front of my unit and dig a little garden bed around it and bung in some Themida and Poa, etc., and chat with all the neighbours who walk by, the council won't do much about it, will it? Nah, you're right.
there are a lot
Something came in from Chris then about a prominent researcher.
And Nigel does point out that if you're using drones, but Chuan's gone now, a remote pilot license is required. He's absolutely spot on. And there are limits as to where you can fly them. But I think he was actually talking about council using them as a council tool for monitoring how the plants are going. I think probably just driving down the street is just as easy.
Yeah, but I agree with the comment about that researcher from Western Sydney. I know who she's talking about. And yeah, he's from Germany. And yeah, so he grew up in Germany. He started in Germany. He's come to Western Sydney and he advocates planting exotic trees in Western Sydney as street trees.
Yeah.
Exotic trees.
Yeah.
For people.
Okay.
Look, Canberra has exotic trees. We have an exotic tree out the front here. It's south facing. It's one that sort of thins during winter and thickens during summer. And I've got a suspicion that a lot of places use it for controlling temperature, cool in summer, allowing a bit more light on in winter. It gets a bit complicated, that one.
We're not going to address environmental problems by
No, we're not, are we, Rhonda? Yeah.
in Sydney. No, we're not.
Okie dokies. Rhonda, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating evening and I have enjoyed it immensely. And from the amount of comments, I've got a sneaky suspicion others agree with me. Thanks so much. Yeah.
And see some familiar faces and hope to catch up with everyone at some point in the future. So thanks.
And Judy, you wouldn't dare ask Rhonda to produce a 1 or 2 page article for our next newsletter, would you?
Of course I would.
I gave this to Sutherland Group and then wrote it up in our newsletter. I can send you.
Well, that's all right. They're probably a bit of an overlap anyhow, Rhonda.
Send you the summary.
Okay. Thanks very much, all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks for recording too, Ian.
Okay. I'll
And
stop the
good night, everyone.
Okay, good night.
No.
Good night.